very warm welcome. My name's David Roth and I'm the CEO of the store WPP and chairman of BAV. And it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to Follow the Sun, 24 hours of broadcasting right across the world, to celebrate the launch of the WPP BAV Best Countries study for 2022, produced in conjunction with the US News and Wharton Business School. It's a pleasure to have you join us for this session. This broadcast is going to travel right across the world, starting in New Zealand and ending 24 hours later in the USA. We have an absolutely packed broadcast today. This year's Best Countries study is our fullest and most comprehensive yet. The attitudes of global business leaders, opinion formers and citizens towards nation strengths has changed dramatically in recent years, never more so than in 2022. And we'll be looking at how those changes in values have impacted overall perceptions of our 85 nations covered in the 2022 study. But perceptions of a country only tell half the story. We'll then visit 24 countries to hear what's happening from WPP experts on the ground, and sometimes how perceptions of a country don't really reflect the situation. Now, our time together promises to be informative, challenging, stimulating, and I hope fun. So let's get started. How a country is viewed around the world is of huge importance, politically, economically, and socially. It has the ability to contribute to both a nation's hard and soft power. The Romans understood this well. SPQR, an abbreviation for Centanus Populosque Romanus, was arguably the first country branding. It was an emblematic, abbreviated phrase referring to the government of the ancient Roman Republic. You only needed to see the emblem, and invaded countries knew exactly what was in store for them. So country branding itself is not new, but measuring it is. Now in our 7th year, the WPP BAV Annual Best Countries Rankings measures global perceptions of countries against a series of characteristics, impressions that have the potential to drive trade, travel and investment. They also directly affect brands. The study was developed by WPP BAV, the Wharton Business School of the University of Pennsylvania, and US News. The ranking is based on a large global survey which asks a range of people about how they perceive different countries against a range of key attributes. Country branding also has a significant impact on corporate and product brands. The words "made in" can instantly lend credibility and trust to a product or brand that a consumer hasn't previously encountered. That could be enough to convince someone to buy, and beyond that, convince them to pay a premium. Likewise, "made in" can prove an instant turn-off if a consumer associates the country of origin with poor safety standards or sees it as being behind the times on social issues or workers' rights. But it's not just a one-way reaction. The perceptions and performance of brands abroad feed back into the development of the country itself. Additionally, willingness for corporates to invest vital FDI is also closely linked to the strength of a country's brand. As local brands and businesses succeed, they generate economic growth as well as lending further positive associations to their country's brand. There's a close relationship between how people feel about a country and their attitudes towards the brand they associate with that country. Strong countries fuel strong brands and vice versa. Think of France and Chanel. Both represent elegance, glamour and prestige. Chanel is intrinsically French, and France is synonymous with Chanel. The same can be said of Italy and Ferrari, or Japan and Sony. In each case, brands and the countries are part of a virtuous circle, a symbiotic relationship. In fact, Germany is a really fine example of this symbiosis in action. Germany has come to represent the qualities of durability and engineering that brands like Bosch, BMW, Audi and Mercedes have shown the world that Germany can deliver. Brands can both shape and be shaped by the perceptions of their country of origins. Japan in the 1970s was known as a cheap manufacturing base, but now respected as a world leader for quality electronics and also technology, thanks largely to brands like Sony and Toyota. South Korea has taken a similar path, with Samsung and Hyundai demonstrating to the entire world what modern South Korea is and is doing, so creating consumer predisposition in international markets that favour other South Korean brands. There's a two-way reaction and a multiplier effect for both. This year's study quantifies the impact. We see that 83% of consumers globally agree that consumer brands play an important role in defining a country's culture. 78% also agree that the country a product is made in impacts my preference to purchase it. Our annual Best Countries ranking was first launched in 2016 at the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, the world's largest gathering of global leaders and heads of industry and influence. It's now in its 7th year, and given how turbulent the past 7 years have been across the globe, enables us to see the impact of the changes. The Best Country ranking incorporates the views of close to 18,000 individual members of the public and business decision makers, surveyed in 85 countries across the world. This year's survey was completed in mid-2022. Collectively, the 85 countries in the 2022 rankings account for about 95% of global gross domestic product per capita and represent 80% of the world's population. Individuals surveyed for Best Countries were asked how closely they associated 73 attributes with a range of countries. These attributes were then grouped into 10 categories that were used to calculate the Best Countries ranking, and more on those attributes later. So come with me as we meet our first guests on our interview stage. Well, I'm very delighted now to be joined by Lord Jim O'Neill, the former Chief Economist of Goldman Sachs and a former government UK Minister and Chairman of Chatham House. Jim, Lord O'Neill, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
President Zelensky has said that the price we have to pay for avoiding a third world war is going to be higher energy bills, increases in the cost of living, and a reduction in living standards. And this comes at a time where we see from our BAV Best Countries study that softer values, sort of like quality of life and social purpose, are much more important in defining a nation's brand. But do you think that public opinion at the moment will pressurise governments to hold their current policies, or do you think they will start to look at alternatives?
Nice, easy question that you start with. I don't know, because it is probably for my generation, never mind the younger generation, the first such issue of this scale and complexity that we've seen. So far, it appears Western nations, who are the prime supporters of Ukraine, of course, have been happy to support the government stance on Ukraine, and superficially accept the cost, which is essentially this enormous cost of living shock. But it remains to be seen how that passes the test of time. So as we're seeing here, the government itself is almost definitely going to have to pay for the cost of this dilemma. I can't help finishing my answer to this very tricky question by also pointing out that if we really want to be serious about climate change and alternative energies, having a permanently higher price for carbon emitting energy forms is probably ultimately the sort of thing that is needed. One would imagine accelerate the desire for alternative energies to become more and more part of everyday life.
Now, you were chairman of the Chatham House, one of the world's leading think tanks. Its mission of a world that is sustainable, secure and prosperous is great. What do you feel, how far are we from realising that goal?
Isn't and hasn't really worked the way it's supposed to do on the tin.
So Jim, what should the priorities of nations be then now?
Yeah, so what should we do about it? You know, I've become linked to a number of things I've been involved in, a big believer in what I broadly call profit with purpose. And we need to have business itself think more about the societal remit of who ultimately they serve. We've lived in an era, and still do, of where the only thing that matters for many, certainly publicly quoted business, is the shareholder. And it's not enough. And private business shouldn't be rewarded if we don't have productivity that goes with these big gains for them. And policymakers need to be more alert to the realities of life rather than just what was in economic textbooks of the 1960s and 70s. And if we don't learn from that, I have a fear that some of the dilemmas that have just blown up dramatically in the past few years out of nowhere could actually get worse.
Now, we started with a hard question, so let's end with an easy one. Lord O'Neill, are you an optimist or a pessimist given the situation we see around the world today?
Right now, I feel a lot more pessimistic than I've done for a long time. However, that said, I've been around the policy area in many different forms for over 40 years, and I've lived through a lot of crises. And the one thing I know for sure is that the crisis you're in, even though it often seems the worst you've ever been through, they come to an end. And one of the big things I've learned is never let a crisis go to waste. And indeed, the making of a business, a leader, or of a country is how they respond to the crisis you are in, because it normally defines how you're going to deal with the future era. So in that sense, there are lots of ways of things that could emerge from all of this mess in a more positive way.
Well, Lord Jim O'Neill, ending on a slightly more positive note than we started, thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's been a privilege to hear what you have to say. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me joining you.
As we travel around the world together in our Follow the Sun broadcast, we'll be hearing news, views and insights from local WPP company colleagues in 24 of the 85 countries covered in the WPP BAV Best Countries study for 2022. Now, before we go to one of those countries, let's remind ourselves of the WPP BAV Best Countries 2022 rankings from the 85th down to the number 1 country. Let's see what the overall findings of Best Countries 2022 are before we go to South Africa for local insights from the WPP team there. And don't forget to download the Best Countries Metaverse experience for even more global insights from the address on your screen. Historically, military power and finance, banks and tanks were the attributes against which we measured a country's power in the world. Not anymore. So what does all this mean? It shows that a nation focused on providing great quality of life for its people, which cares about the rights and equality, and has a focus on entrepreneurship, is seen as having the most powerful nation brand. This reflects a world today and the factors that influence public perceptions and consumer decision-making, and by implication, a nation's political policy making. So let's take a look at those 10 factors and their weights for 2022. Entrepreneurship, 14.2%. Cultural influence, 10.4%. Power, 5%. Heritage, 3.1%. Adventure, 5.5%. Quality of life, 14.5%. Open for business, 9.3%. Social purpose, 13.5%. Agility, 14%. Movers, 10.6%. So it's clearly no longer just tanks and banks that give a country influence around the world. Softer power, which comes about as a result of entrepreneurship and cultural exports, is increasingly making an impact.
When you think of top exports to come out of South Africa, you think gold, platinum, even coal. But actually, one of the best exports to come from South Africa is not even something you can physically touch, but rather it's something that you feel.
It's Joel on the bed.
Purchase your tracks today.
You see, South Africa has always had a rich culture when it comes to music. I mean, one of the best-selling Disney movies of all time had some South African essence in it. You know, that opening song, Life, that was actually sung by our very own Lebo M. And also the song The Lion Sleeps Tonight, the one sung by Timon and Pumbaa, that was actually a remake of Solomon Linda's Mbube, a humble man from rural KZN who probably deserves way more credit than has been given. But that's a conversation for another day. But you see, for the most part, South Africa's music experience has always been kept to more of a local experience, you know, just like most countries or outside of like the US and the UK. But then lockdown happened. And then something really unexpected transpired when an explosive sound that kind of entered the hearts and soul of the people of South Africa from like 2019 and before finally found its way to the rest of the world in 2020. So basically, this is the story of how Amapiano became a global phenomenon that connected the youth from every corner of the world together for a greater music experience.
It's Joel on the bed.
So basically what we're doing is we're kind of talking about the impact of Amapiano. So I just wanted to find out from your perspective, what is Amapiano?
I think for me, Amapiano is over and above, being a music genre. It is a revolution. It is a way of life. It is a culture. It is a lifestyle. I think it's also a way in which the current youth of South Africa can express themselves in a way that has never been seen before, authentically, being themselves. I mean, we see it with the likes of Abokamompela, etc. They influence the style and dance culture in South Africa, making sort of like an impact on South Africa's music industry. And I really do think that we saw the growth and explosion in popularity of this movement. And that's why I'm not calling it a genre, because it's not just a genre, it's everywhere. It's a movement. During the COVID-19 pandemic, with platforms such as TikTok, etc., being one of the earliest drivers of the movement back in 2020. So yeah, that's what Amapiano is to me.
From a music perspective that everyone knows, it's a subgenre of house music, right? With bringing in influence of jazz and kwaito. And I hate saying this word because I know people are going to be on my case. Soul music, but it's such a genre that speaks to everyone. To me, it allows me to express myself because I'm not musically challenged musically gifted in the way that I can sing or rap, but it allows me to use someone else's words or beats, that is, from a piano perspective, to express myself better. And I think that's what is reaching everyone. It's not even in South Africa specifically, but globally. So I think to me, it's just, I don't know. It's got the heart. It's got that drum line, that bass line that just gets you in any type of mood that you could be in. It speaks to you, or it makes you express yourself better. So for me, yeah, it helps me express myself better by using someone else's tools when I cannot express myself musically, if that makes sense.
Now, you can't talk the impact of music without talking numbers. And these days, when we're talking numbers, we're talking streams. Spotify actually had recorded that between the time of 2019 to 2021, Amapiano streams grew by over 600%. And then by the end of 2021, we were looking at millions of global all-time streams. And specifically in May 2022, there were over 920 million global all-time streams. But beyond the numbers game is actually something else we need to speak about, and that's how Amapiano found its way crossing cultures and spaces in some of the most unexpected places in the world. And the place that actually made all of this happen, basically this gathering of nations of the youth coming together for greater music experience, is actually no other than the dance platform itself, TikTok. You see, once Amapiano and TikTok connected, it was just a major explosion. Amapiano had people of African descent in other continents who have never touched Africa moving and shaking because they finally found a sound that made them feel connected to a place that they might have never been. And then what also happened is that it crossed into other unexpected cultures where we saw even people from the Asian community joining in on the hype. Amapiano eventually became one of the biggest genres of music to actually even make like chart-topping pop songs too. And then with that happening, it kind of translated into big super artists like Chris Brown and Usher, also adding in their dance moves to the hashtag Amapiano TikTok dance challenges. Chris Brown, of course, took it a step further and even ended up recording his own Amapiano song called Mona Lisa. So in essence,
Amapiano is not just something for South Africans to enjoy. It's a sound for everyone from everywhere who loves music that allows them to express themselves completely and utterly freely.
I mean, I think Amapiano is transcended in the world because it's transcended at a time where the time is right. You know, dance music will culturally in many places will always kind of make a difference or will always do something. That's why I talk about things like Afropop. But I think the differentiator with Amapiano is that like it's the time, it's its timing. It's when you see a guy who does Amapiano who looks like any other guy who could be in London, Europe, or the States. Whether you're talking about Musa Keys, whether you're talking about Maporisa, whether you're talking about when you look at these guys, they don't look like they look like a young person of the world, not like an African young person, you know. It's the time where the metrics literally like are what everybody sees, the numbers. Oh, like the Major League Twins, you know, you could see the backyard the balcony sessions. They got like even now they're gonna 72 they doing the 72-hour Guinness record longest playing thing right now, you know. You look at those numbers, everyone can see the metrics. So you know what numbers are doing from the streaming platforms, what numbers are doing, they also taking down the barriers or the barriers in the world. So if you can see an African who's got like 5 million views and you are a European and you got like 100,000 views, you know, it starts going, what's happening here, you know? So I think it's the timing that's literally made Amapiano successful from an aesthetic perspective. When you look at like who's creating it, they look like worldly young people. They don't look like is an African, you know, and they look like worldly young people, A. And secondly, the metrics, when you look at numbers and you remove where the numbers are from, numbers will always be numbers. You cannot run away from the numbers, right? And I think the third thing, the dance culture also literally like is constantly evolving, although it always goes back to its original, but it's constantly evolving with new additions.
Working with certain Amapiano artists has helped brands seem more commercial and accessible, while at the same time also then making them appear more alternative and cooler. Well, that's if the campaign is done well. Music has always been a gateway to fashion and culture, and with Amapiano dominating the charts, it can seem like an absolute no-brainer for companies to want to work with these megastar artists. But the most important question that brands need to actually start asking themselves is, are we just taking from the culture or are we actually uplifting it?
So I just want to kind of get your opinion on, do you believe brands, or what role do you believe brands need to play in uplifting Amapiano?
So I think just to answer what you asked, if brands are actually taking from the culture or uplifting the culture, I think obviously because they can see that all the numbers are going towards Amapiano, the streams are saying it all, the culture, everyone is searching Amapiano. You see the data tells us that everyone wants to listen to Amapiano. So I just think some of the brands were just taking from Amapiano because obviously they wanted to report back to say, cool, we collaborated with X, Y, and Z, and this is what we achieved, blah, blah, blah. But some brands, in that instance, they're actually trying to uplift the Amapiano culture. And I think brands can play a vital role in making this movement to be a global movement and not only a regional or a South African movement. Because some brands are global brands and they have that footprint to make sure that Amapiano reach the heights that they never imagined that they can actually reach.
Amapiano has done an incredible job of giving the world something to be joyous about. I mean, it's a great sounding sounds to dance to. But there's something else that here in South Africa we can be happy about when it comes to what Amapiano has done. And that is giving us platform to have more jobs, opportunities, and money. The prominence of Amapiano has also directly improved the lives of those from low to middle income backgrounds. The truth is, even in most recent years in the South African entertainment industry, creators were getting paid in alcohol and exposure. But it's a new day with the Amapiano evolution. More creatives are getting actual paid gigs, actual big endorsements. People are buying beautiful houses, expensive cars, and are wearing designer clothes. But most importantly, creatives in this country are finally getting recognized for their art. And in a country where the unemployment rate is at an estimated 33.9%, this is the type of hope that the youth needed to see. Amapiano and the artist have worked very hard to get it to where it is. And basically, what they've done is they've helped South Africa be seen as a creative economy. And if things continue this way and even find its way intercepting other local music genres, then music by itself can become one of the greatest contributors to the GDP. And in return, this can help support millions, not just a few tens or hundreds, but millions of jobs within South Africa from things such as retailing, catering, marketing, events, and so forth. So that's why the impact of Amapiano is so important. A vibrant music economy drives value for a country in several important ways. It fuels job creation, it promotes economic growth, tourism development, and of course, artistic growth. And essentially, it helps strengthen a country's brand. So the question is, what do you think Amapiano going global will mean for the growth of South Africa?
I think one, it will highlight South Africa as an entertainment hub. I think just from the pandemic itself, there were a lot of quite a few key learnings just from an industry's point of view, the culture and creative economy rather, or industry, which is obviously, music, entertainment, etc. We've seen that there's been a significant decline during COVID. I think we're sitting at about 8.2 billion rand as a contribution to the GDP. And during the pandemic, we were at about, 41 billion rand. So that's almost 50% of the country's national GDP that has been affected, right? So, and we see how Amapiano has started to strike a chord globally. Just this past weekend, we saw guys like Burna Boy, who's become this global superstar, the likes of your Tiwa Savage, all having a good time in London with major league DJs, Deben Gogo and Uncle Vinny. So what this basically, in my opinion, strikes a chord on is in terms of global brands are starting to look at investments into Africa to really start to see that, their business outlook can pretty much scale as far as the country is concerned, So there's other brands that I've been working with who are really advocating for the brand South Africa. And, part of their core mandates, or rather their core objectives, is to, one, eradicate xenophobia as a culture of South Africans. And number two, to also attract foreign investment. And we've seen a number of investments that have been happening into the country. Just the other day, I was reading an article about Japan looking to invest $30 billion into Africa as a continent, as far as technology, science, as well as entertainment, right? So it's about where are we as a country in as far as those conversations are concerned. And one of the things that we can showcase is actually our entertainment. And you and I both know that brands always look for two passion points as far as consumers are concerned. It's either sports or music, right? So if music is the catalyst of, getting us a global audience, then why not enhance it? Why not empower it? And why not get even government intervention into that to really drive these narratives forward and really start scaling from an economist perspective? Just the entertainment industry alone has been deemed to be higher than the agriculture industry as far as the contribution to the GDP. So it really shows that we play a significant role in terms of scaling as a country and really driving our economy and creating job opportunities. And I think entrepreneurship is quite a big one now. We've seen a number of new institutions emerging from the entertainment industry, the likes of your Slick On Lives. There's guys who are still in varsity who have already got businesses that they've started and are not really looking for a job, but really looking to start companies that can employ other people, given the rate of unemployment as a country. So I think there's a big opportunity where the private sector, as well as the entertainment industry and the public sector, can really start to create a synergy instead of, in essentially driving sort of like economic attractiveness to the rest of the world.
If we can continue investing in helping South Africa become a creative scene in greater numbers, then this country can get the type of investment it needs to uplift the nation. So keep your eyes on our little country, because we're exporting more of our creativity than ever before. And soon, creative exports will become the #1 export from South Africa to the world.
Well, I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted now to be joined by Dr. Stacey Graham, who is the Global Racial Equity Programs Director at WPP. Stacey, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
This year we see social purpose becoming significantly important, which is a good thing. Why do you think that's so?
I believe in the survey you define social purpose around a few categories such as caring about gender and racial equity, the environment, human rights, and so forth, right? And what we understand about humans is we have an innate desire to have a reason for being. That's another word for purpose. So I'd say if we look at what's happened in the world in the last 2.5, 3 years, that is definitely catapulted into the mainstream. We have all these things coming together that are pinpointing, illustrating how we're failing as a collective.
And do you think that failure as a collective is something that's now being exposed right across the globe?
Absolutely. I would say that even before 2020, we could see it happening, but there's something about a restriction of freedom of movement, right? That makes people sit at home and have nothing else to do but recognize and look into everything that's wrong with the world, if you will. And so I think that it's on people's minds. What does it mean to be in the collective when I'm sitting at home and can't leave my house anymore? What does it mean to really be connected as a society? How do we care for the most vulnerable? And to be really honest, with COVID-19, we didn't do a great job of that. So I think people are asking different questions than they were 2 to 3 years ago.
And I think I found it quite interesting to see the relationship between this movement, I mean, let's call it a movement, coming from the population upwards.
Absolutely. I mean, we also see that some of our health officials do move more politically than we would have expected. But there were people across the world who made the decision to wear a mask even when it was no longer mandated, who stayed at home even when they didn't want to, who got on the streets for probably the largest social movement since 1968, right? It was a global social movement to bring awareness to racial inequality. So I think there's a coming together even in times of divisiveness.
Now, one of the things we've seen in the study is this sort of interrelationship between a country's brand and companies' brands, and we're seeing that interrelationship even more sort of mingled and prevalent this year. So what should companies do to improve their social purpose in relation to how their country is seen?
That is a great question. I think that is something that they're still figuring out. But one thing we know for sure is people aren't simply incentivized by money. That's not enough to keep employees today. Employees want to work somewhere where they feel proud of not only the work that they do, but the things that the company stands for. They want to see their company standing up for social issues that they personally care about.
Stacey, why do you think suddenly companies are finding a political voice as opposed to purely a corporate voice?
I think to an extent, we have been able to observe this shift away. When I studied, there was a clear connection. The business strategy has to align with shareholder value. That's all we care about, maximizing shareholder value. And there was a notion that maximizing shareholder value stood in opposition to a social purpose, if you will. And today, I think people are recognizing that's actually not true. And we increase shareholder value when we can ensure that we have high employee engagement, low turnover, and people care about what they do in the company they work for.
Well, Stacey Graham, that's a fantastic place to stop. This whole topic is something that we are all going to have to understand a lot better, and not just understand it, but also ensure that it's actions as opposed to merely words. But for the moment, Dr. Stacey Graham, the Global Racial Equity Programs Director at WPP, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you.
Hello and a very warm welcome. My name's David Roth and I'm the CEO of the store WPP and Chairman of BAV. Thank you very much indeed for joining me in this very special metaverse experience. exploring the WPP BAV Best Countries 2022 study in conjunction with Wharton Business School and US News. Here we are in the Arrivals Hall, where you'll be able to discover the key insights from this year's study relating to global trends. Here you'll also find exclusive interviews with global experts and analysis of the data. And what a year we've had. There have been a lot of changes from last year. From here you can also go and visit the 85 countries that are ranked in this year's report. Each of those countries have their own individual room where you can explore a wealth of data and insights into each individual country. You might well see some surprises along your journey. And in the departure area, you can discover more about the study itself. Enjoy your trip around the BAV Best Countries 2022 Metaverse. Well, we're almost at the end of our broadcast. A big thanks to everybody from the local WPP companies who've participated, and of course our central team that's put together all of our Follow the Sun 24 hours of broadcasting, to our directors, to Dasgupta, to Paul Reifer, and our producers, Sarah Cousins and Lady Victoria Robinson. Well, all it's left for me, David Roth at WPP, to say thank you very much indeed for joining, and the next broadcast follows shortly on the hour.
From the start.